Hey guys, stay tuned to the end of the episode where I'm going to read one of the iTunes reviews for Fascination Street podcast. If you've left one, it might be yours, and if you haven't, do it, and maybe it will be in the future. I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. Welcome back, Streetwalkers. A couple of weeks ago, I heard an interview with the director of the most recent ESPN 30 for 30 documentary called Chuck Tito. The director's name is Micah Brown, and I found his story so intriguing and fascinating that I had to reach out to him and talk to him myself. Micah is such a genuine and friendly person that I reached out to him, and within 2 hours, we were doing the interview. It all came together so quickly, and I super appreciate Micah for doing this. In this episode, we talk about how Micah got from Nebraska to Kansas and how he got into the film program at the University of Kansas, where he was taken under the wing of director Kevin Wilmot, who went on to win an Academy Award. We also talk about what it's like to pitch a film where everybody in the room is completely naked, and some of his earlier films, including Prison Fighters, which is a documentary about a little-known feature of the Thailand prison system where you can have your sentence reduced by winning sanctioned Muay Thai fights. The more you win, the more time is knocked off of your sentence. And if you win enough, you're set free. And finally, we chat about his most recent project, the latest ESPN 30 for 30, called Chuck Tito. We talk about how this came about, and what his experience was like working with both of these iconic MMA fighters. So enjoy, folks. This is my conversation with the director of Chuck Tito, Micah Brown.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Micah Brown. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. For the audience, I heard Micah on the Adam Carolla show last week, and it was such a compelling story. Well, his story, his part of that story was so compelling that I had to reach out and get to talk to him myself. So you're welcome, audience. So, you're welcome. So, Micah, I know that you played sports at, I think it was Kansas State or Kansas U or
No. University of Kansas. There's only one. We don't mess with K-State now.
So is Kansas the one that has like orange end zones?
No. Kansas is the one that beats up on K-State every year. Crimson blue, waving the wheat, all that fun stuff.
Nice. What is the mascot?
Jayhawks.
Ah, the big chicken. There you go.
There we go. Yep, that's right.
All right. So I know they went to school there, and I think you played ball there, right?
Yes, sir. I ran track and played football there.
Okay. So how did you get there? Did you grow up in Kansas?
No, you know what? I actually grew up in Nebraska, and my dad played for the Huskers. And so, I'd always been around sports and had a passion for that, and I was pretty good track athlete, and so I got recruited really hard to do track, and I got recruited for football, but not by Kansas. And I just kind of realized, I wanted to do a little bit different path than what my dad had done. There was a lot of pressure to kind of live up to him playing for the Huskers and being a football star, and I loved him, but I kind of wanted to pave my own way. And KU had a film school. And on my recruiting visit with track, they brought me in to the film school and they introduced me to a professor named Kevin Wilmot. And Kevin recently won an Oscar for The Black Klansman. But at the time, so he's a screenwriter.
Nice.
And so he's a genius filmmaker. And, the track coach was savvy enough to bring me in there. And he said, hey, I wanted to introduce you to a guy that's really doing films. And Kevin said, hey, if you come here, you can come visit my office anytime. I'll be your advisor and I'll take you under my wing. And that was probably the best thing that I could hear, and probably the worst thing for him because I was knocking on his door all the time. But it was one of those things where we developed a friendship, and he was a mentor to me, and I ended up committing to KU did track for a year, walked on for football, and ended up earning a football scholarship after the Orange Bowl.
Oh, wow.
And so it was really special how my journey to KU began.
That's really cool. So I know that during your college tour, you got that really cool introduction, but what inspired the filmmaking process? Like, what in you sparked a desire to be in the film business in any way?
My uncles, they live out in Boston, and one of my uncles was a news reporter, and they used to always come and make home movies with me. I think my first movie that I made when I was a kid, I was MC Hammer. And I don't know if anybody remembers those old MC Hammer cartoons where he's got the shoes and he's dancing around. The shoes are talking to him. But that was me. I was like out there, and I was always wearing a costume. You'd catch me in a Star Wars costume or Indiana Jones or, some superhero wearing a cape, riding my bike. And making movies was always just a part of my childhood. And then as I grew up, my friends and I would go make home movies. And it wasn't really until after I got done with college that I realized, man, this sports and movie making thing might be able to go hand in hand.
Sweet. And so I guess that was somehow that information was relayed to your recruiters?
You mean as far as like them knowing that I wanted to be a filmmaker?
Yeah, because I can't imagine that they take all the football recruits or all the athlete recruits.
Yeah, no, I was actually the only athlete at the time when I came in that was in the arts and doing anything that was creative. And so it's kind of ironic because I guess it would have been my junior and my senior year, I met another guy who was on the track team, and he was a film major, and he actually became the DP of Chuck and Tito.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so he and I, two Jayhawks, we end up kind of chasing this crazy dream together and still work together. His name's Ian Trimble, and he's living out in LA, working on big movies and stuff now. And so it's been a pretty wild ride.
That is kick-ass. So where did you go to high school?
So I went to high school in Kearney, Nebraska, so Kearney High School.
Okay.
So I grew up in a small town of 5,000, Holdridge, Nebraska, and transferred to a bigger school my sophomore year. And so growing up in a small town, dreams are pretty limited. I remember one time talking to my advisor, and my advisor, I think I was a freshman, said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I want to be an actor." He kind of took that information. He wrote something in the file, and I said, "Well, what'd you put down?" He goes, "Well, I just put construction, because that's what your dad does." I was like, "Man, that's not what I want to do. I want to be an actor." And he's like, "Yeah, but we're going to put something more realistic down." And my heart kind of transitioned away from acting and towards behind the camera. But I think that going to a different high school, going to Kearney High, that was a little bit bigger, they were able to help kind of foster in me and my parents as well that you could take a dream out of Midwest and still do big things. And that's still, I think, a little bit of the reason why I still live in Lawrence, Kansas, is because, I've kind of been on this lifelong mission show that I could still do it. And I can do it from anywhere. It doesn't matter if I live in LA, New York, where it is. If you're good, you're good. And if you can play, you can play. And that's why I choose to kind of keep my Midwest roots and stay around here.
Do you find it harder?
I don't find it harder. I think, if anything, it's kind of nice, because, in the LA scene, I did it for a little bit, in New York and whatever. You go to meetings and meetings and meetings, and they lead to nowhere, and so it's kind of this, you don't really know who's really about it and who wants to just talk about it. And so I think now, living in the Midwest, if somebody wants to work with you, they fly you out. And, in today's technology, I'm collaborating with people all over the country. And so it doesn't really matter where you live. Yeah, you might miss out on some like immediate opportunities because it's just not next door. But in the business that we're in, we can travel, and it's really not that big a deal.
Yeah, I got to imagine it's a bigger show of commitment if they're willing to fly you out rather than just have you waste your time driving across town.
Yeah, I mean, you know how it is, man. This business is just like, I know somebody at Netflix. It's whoever the like hot, network or whoever is. Everybody's like they're on the verge of, having something sold there or doing whatever. And so I think I just got kind of burnt out of the rat race. And, now, whenever I get a chance to do something, it's calling because it's a real opportunity and not just like perceived opportunity.
That makes sense. So I don't know the order, so I might get these out of order, but you did a documentary film called NFL Draft Diaries. This is going to sound like a dumb question, but what was that about?
Yeah, so Draft Diaries, the series, it was really fun. It was for LeBron James's company, Spring Hill Entertainment, and they have a platform called Uninterrupted. And so what we did is we followed a couple guys, Jabril Peppers and Marshawn Lattimore, up to and through the NFL draft. And so I had done a bunch of these kind of draft shows before. Actually, my first TV job was a show called Draft Academy for ESPN, where I met fellow producer Jose Morales, who produced this film with me. And he was the first person in TV to really hire me and take a risk on me. And so I had a long history of working with these draft football shows, and it really just kind of, embedding with them, getting to know their story and following them up to and through the draft. And it's been something that's been fun, and, I've done a ton of them now. And so that was another good one.
So in addition to that, you also did a film called Prison Fighters. Now that sounds like it has a very, very interesting storyline. Hit us with that one.
Yeah, Prison Fighters was a crazy, crazy, crazy film about a prison in Thailand that allows inmates to fight for their freedom. And so we followed an inmate who'd been convicted of murder, and we kind of embedded with him, and you kind of follow this relationship with him and his son that's on the outside, and you get to know kind of the inner workings of, is he guilty? Did he do it? And as it's leading up to his freedom fight, to see if he's going to be getting out of prison. And that was my first big documentary as a director. It was an idea that I pitched to Showtime and then was able to execute it. And I think that definitely played a huge part in me being able to do the Chuck and Tito film.
So that fight for your freedom thing, is that after you are declared innocent or guilty, or is that part of the process?
Well, you're in jail because of the conviction, and so he was guilty. He was in jail, and at every fight that he would win versus these foreigners, they would take time off of his sentence. So he was in there for murder, and I think he got out in 5 years, if I remember right.
Wow, that's wildly fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. It'd be like the equivalent of, in Thailand, Muay Thai is so huge.
Right.
And some of their best athletes are, Muay Thai fighters. In fact, I think the last two Olympics, the boxers that have represented Thailand have come out of this program.
Out of this prison program?
Yeah, the Olympic boxers.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so this guy, they go and they get a royal pardon for, participating in this. And some of them aren't as severe as murder. A lot of them are like stealing or drugs or something like that. But yeah, a former WBC boxer that we followed in it, he was a world champion boxer, and he got out of this program. And it was pretty crazy, and it'd be like the equivalent of, hey, your country's best athletes, LeBron James, he's suddenly behind bars. And you have the Olympics coming up. What do? Well, we need LeBron to play, so let's develop this rehabilitation program for him to be able to play. And that's kind of how it worked.
That's insane. That Aaron Hernandez story could have ended a lot differently.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was probably the most significant project that I've been a part of in my life, and probably will be the craziest that I'll ever be a part of, because I don't think anything can prepare you for being in a prison with 5,000 inmates, and like 10 guards, surrounding you, and all chanting, and, the whole bit. I mean, it was pretty wild.
Now, I'm assuming these are not fight to the death fights?
No, they're normal, like sanctioned Muay Thai fights, but it's a very competitive. You got to remember that everybody in Thailand has a professional record. I mean, it's like soccer. You grow up in Europe and you play soccer. It's huge.
Yeah, it's like hockey in Canada.
And so these little kids, they're 8 years old, they're fighting, and they're making more money than their parents are, and so it's a big time sport. And so you go to a prison and they only have so many slots for you to be able to compete in this program for your freedom. And you got 5,000 former fighters with a record. It's a super, super competitive territory.
That is so nuts. Never heard of anything even like that in real life. In TV or movies, sure, but man, that's nuts. How'd you stumble upon that story?
That story was crazy because I was just looking for what was next. I had been doing a bunch of recruiting content for people. And, for me, I was getting burnt out on like doing the same old story of some guy's dream being to go to the NFL and, he's impoverished and now he's rich and, whatever. It was like getting a little bit old for me, and I wanted to do a long form documentary. And so I started poking around with some different ideas, and I was like, man, I should do a prison documentary. That'd be cool. Maybe a prison boxing documentary. That'd be cool. And then I thought, man, wouldn't it be cool if somebody had an opportunity to fight for their freedom? So I Google searched some stuff, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, this is real. And reached out to a journalist who had written an article. He put me in touch with another guy. I emailed that email every single day for like 6 months, trying to, get in touch with this guy. And eventually I got an email back that said, Micah, we got your email. Please stop sending emails. We'd love to set up a Skype meeting. And I got in touch with this guy, and he's from Estonia. He was may or may not have been involved with the mafia and some underground government stuff going on in Thailand to get these things going. And, we started talking, and eventually that was going nowhere. So I got on a plane and flew to Thailand.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors. Let's get back into it.
And I'm in Thailand, and my wife is, going, what are you doing? Why are you here? And I'm like, I got to get access to this story, because I felt like it was such a great story. If I pitched it to anybody without having assurances, they would steal it from me.
Right.
And that had happened a couple times with some couple different networks. And so I realized I had to have my name on it, so that I would be the only person that could tell the story. And so the driver takes me to this dark alley, and they pull open this fence, and the car drives in there, and I see the guy standing there, and then he goes, hey, let's go inside and meet. And I said, where are we? He said, we're at a sauna. I'm like, oh, a sauna, what is this? And I go, is there a restaurant or something in there? He goes, no, we're going to sit in the sauna. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So we go in there, and he says, get undressed.
Wait, hold on. Do you say bad words? Are you offended by bad words?
No, I'm not offended by bad words at all.
This whole thing sounds like some weird ploy for this dude to see your dick.
Oh, yeah, I know. Listen, trust me, all these things are racing through my mind. I'm like, what is going to happen right now? I'm like, let's just like walk in confidence right now. So I'm like, all right. So I get undressed, and then he and the guy that he's with get undressed, and they were checking to see if I had a wire.
Ah, okay.
And I'm like, oh, this is crazy. This is out of like a mafia movie. So we go sit down. We're in this sauna, and he's pointing out all these people. He's like, that's a crooked cop. This is a guy who's meeting with this mafia member over here. And you had like, I'm not joking. You look around the room, and it was all these different nations like represented in this sauna. And it was all these people. He said, that's where everybody meets. And so it was this bizarre meeting where we're sitting there naked. I'm trying to pitch to them why I'm the right person to tell this story. And eventually they said, you know what? We like you. We're going to sign a deal with you that you're the only person that we're going to allow into this prison for the next year and a half, because other people have come here, but whenever we got to the sauna, they didn't want to go in. And, I guess the bright side of this whole thing is that I can join the long list of people who have gotten naked to make a film happen. Yeah. So it was absolutely wild, but, it's the best, it's the best elevator pitch in the world, right? It's like, there's a prison in Thailand that allows inmates to fight for their freedom, so when Showtime heard it, I had some relationships there, and they helped push it through, and it was awesome.
Now you have to make the non-documentary version of that where, this ex-college football star becomes a documentary filmmaker, makes this connection with some people in Thailand, flies over there, and it's a trap. And then he has to fight his way out. Now he's got to win 5.
Oh, man, it's a trap. And I get, oh, man, yeah, I would have beat that ass. It would have been crazy. It was cool. It was fun, It was one of those things where, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity, to be able to do it and, to go over there and experience other cultures and to be able to see how people live and, tell this beautiful story about forgiveness and redemption. It was once in a lifetime for sure.
Sounds like a fucking horror movie, man.
Oh, I'm telling you, man, it was crazy.
I bet it felt like one too for a while.
Yeah, it was pretty nerve-wracking. You see these guys walking around, they got like gardening tools, and you look around, you're like, where is the... I'll tell you, this is a quick story. We went in there and, I was kind of concerned. I got my whole crew in there, and I'm filming, and it's not like I'm just like walking around monitoring. Whenever I go to a project, I'm filming. Like, I'm a DP by trade, so I'm holding the camera. And we go in there, and I said, hey, who are the security guys? And I'm talking through a translator. And they're like, this guy. And this guy is probably like 5'4", like, 80 years old. I'm like, this is the guy that's going to protect us from the most, you just got done explaining to us, these are the most deadly people in Thailand. And this is the guy that's going to protect us? I'm like, man, if something goes down, I'm taking that stick from this dude. It's going to get crazy. Because they had no guns. They had no guns. All they had was like wooden staffs that they were expecting to like beat off these inmates with.
Can you rephrase that?
The wooden staffs.
Oh, you just said that this dude was going to beat off a bunch of inmates.
Oh. Hey, it's prison, man. Who knows? I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Tell me about Unrivaled.
Yeah, so that was a cool project. That one's kind of in like purgatory right now because they're trying to figure out. But basically, it's a film about the history of Kansas basketball and specifically the Bill Self era and them pursuing UCLA's conference streak of 14 straight Big 12 championships. And so it kind of like weaves in and out of the last 15 years of Bill Self's career. Building this crazy historic program, what they were able to do it and how they were able to keep the streak alive. And that project was really fun. It's been done for a couple of years, and there's some licensing stuff. The producers kind of ran out of money, and so they're trying to figure out how to license all the footage. It was kind of like, oops, we got to pay for footage, one of those things. And so, hopefully they can get it figured out because I think it's a really great quality film, and hopefully it'll come out soon.
So that is potentially forthcoming.
Yeah, it's done. I've been done with it for over a year.
Right.
We're just kind of waiting to get the licensing thing figured out, but I'm not really involved in that. That was one of the ones that I was just kind of paid to put it together and make, and the rest is the business stuff is really on them. Gotcha.
Now, finally, let's transition to talking about the most recent 30 for 30, which is called Chuck and Tito. And you were the director. Tell me how you came up with that idea. Because from what I understand, that was your idea and you pitched it to 30 for 30.
Yeah, so, it was fun. I had been talking with Jose Morales, who's a producer on the film, and he works at ESPN. And we were like, man, we got to find another project to work on together. And I was like, I really want to do a UFC doc. They hadn't done one yet for 30 for 30. And I thought one would be long overdue and really special. And so I started kind of going through a mental checklist of everything that it should include if it was going to be the first one. And one of the things was this should probably talk about the origin of the sport. It's been 25 years since they started the UFC, and now it's grown into this multi-billion-dollar business. So it's got to be about that. But I didn't want to make it just about the sport. I wanted to have some characters to it. And so I was like, well, who grew the sport? And at that same time, Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz announced that they were going to do their third fight. And I was like, oh, man, this would be epic to follow these guys through their third fight, and kind of talk about how they shaped the sport. And so that's exactly what we did. We shot hours and hours and hours of footage of them leading up to this third fight. A lot of it didn't make the film, but obviously the final chapter did. And what it did for me was it kind of put things in perspective to be able to say, this is the conclusion of a rivalry. This is where these guys are now. And it kind of provided an interesting backdrop to this idea of how long do fighters fight and how long should they fight. We really hadn't seen that, in this sport yet, because this is the first kind of big class of guys who are coming up through it. We saw all the boxing greats and how they dealt with the sport in their twilights of their career, but we really hadn't seen that in the UFC. And so I thought that was something that was really important. And, we pitched it to ESPN. They loved it. They loved my work with prison fighters, and had a good relationship with Jose and Brett Okamoto as well, who is a reporter on the film and a producer. And, I think this thing just kind of took new life and got greenlit very quickly. And we're really, really proud of it.
Very, very cool. Now, before we go too much further, I guess it was your high school. Well, I want to assume it was in Kearney, Nebraska. Your high school did something pretty cool for you when this film came out. Tell us about that.
Well, it wasn't actually the high school that put it on. It was more of just, I got to go back to my hometown. I got to speak to the high school, and we were able to rent out a theater in my hometown and be able to have a screening of it. And that was a theater that was really special to me, the World Theater in Kearney, Nebraska. Because, in high school, what do? You like sneak out of class and go see movies, or do whatever. And so it was really fun. The creator of The Blacklist, John Bokenkamp, actually helped revive that theater, and he's from Kearney. And so he renovated it all. And it was really special to be able to have friends and family be able to come out, go to the show on the night that it was airing, and kind of be honored in that way. And it was just really fun to kind of return to the roots and be able to talk to kids and talk to an audience and just say, hey, it's possible to do it from here.
That's really cool. Because going back to what you said earlier, growing up in a small town, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of options. And so it's really cool that you were able to, go out and make this film and then bring it back to that small town to show everybody, what, there are other options. You don't have to stay in this small town. People leave all the time and do great things. And you can still come back. That's cool, but you don't have to stay here.
Yeah, I mean, if the people do want to stay there, there's nothing on that.
Absolutely.
My parents live there, and other people live there, and I think that's great. But for me, wanting to do something that was out of the normal, which I would say in the Midwest, doing filmmaking is out of the ordinary. And so for me, it was really important to be able to say that if there was somebody, and I got to meet a handful of kids at the high school that are interested in filmmaking, and I just give them my number and I say, hey, I'm one of the rare people that will actually help. If you reach out, I just ask people meet my energy, so like if I'm going to help you, I'm not going to give you anything, but I'll help if you can put the work in yourself.
Oh, I like that. You probably learned that from all of your years as an athlete.
Yeah. I mean, those are the kind of mindsets, nobody's going to give you anything, and it doesn't mean anything if they did give it to you. You don't want that. You shouldn't want that. I think a lot of people do want that. They want it to just happen for them, but they don't want to put anything into it in order to deserve it. And, if you don't sacrifice anything to make your dreams happen, and this sounds just like a, bumper sticker or something, but if you don't sacrifice anything, then you won't care about it when you get it. And it's kind of like if your dad goes and buys you a brand new Mercedes and then you go wreck it, you don't care if dad's going to buy you another one. But if you work your butt off and you have a summer job, like for me, I grew up working. My dad, he owned a construction company, and I had a job since the time I was like in 5th grade, and I was working every day after school. And that was just the way we kind of grew up. And so I think that, you earn everything that you get. And obviously you rely on people to come in your life and mentor you like my father did and like my uncles did. And you're kind of raised by the community of people that surround you, but you got to put in the work. And I think those are things that have really translated over first onto the football field and then secondly into filmmaking.
I think that's great. I don't think enough is talked about, as far as skin in the game. And you're right. I mean, if you don't earn it, you don't really care about it. So this film took you roughly 14 months, I guess, from pitch to a release, more or less. What do you think is the greatest thing that you learned either about Chuck and Tito or about the industry itself in that 14 months?
It's a great question. I think over the course of a year, when you become friends with the subjects. I think that that's something that you just are going to learn more about them over the course of talking to them for a longer period of time. I think what I learned about each individual guy from Chuck, I think there's a lot of misconceptions of, when you watch Chuck Liddell, even for myself, when I watched Chuck Liddell on TV, I thought, man, this guy is violent. He's a scary guy. I think he is a scary guy. I definitely wouldn't walk up and push him. He definitely knocked my head off still. But, he's a really down to earth dude, and I don't know that I've met that many high profile athletes that, actually give you their cell number, and Tito as well, and call you up and they speak to you man to man. They don't speak to you through an agent, through a handler, through all this stuff that has become accustomed to. And I understand people got to do that kind of thing. But, with those guys, they are who they are. And I think it says a lot about them that they weren't afraid to address things head on and be able to have conversations with them. And, I respected that a lot. I think for me, my personal journey on this whole thing, I think I didn't really understand a lot about the sport and as far as respecting it the way that I do now. I think when I first started watching it, I was like, man, this is crazy. I thought about it a little bit it was marketed at first that it was a blood sport and that it was uber dangerous. And then all these guys are probably going to be have jello brains at the end of it, and I think what I realized is, hey, this sport is actually takes a lot of athleticism, a lot of technique. I have a new appreciation for it. And I think it's my favorite sport now. I think it's actually past football as my favorite sport to watch, which is something for me to say because I love the sport of football, but man, it's wildly entertaining. And I think there's nothing bigger than testing yourself against another individual. And what better way to do it than through mixed martial arts?
Nice.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors. Let's get back into it.
Back when you said that it sort of surprised you that they were, not going through people, they were just sort of handling it themselves instead of, their representation. And you said that you felt like that said a lot about them. Well, let me tell you this, sir. That also says a lot about you because for those listening, that's exactly how this interview happened. I reached out and instead of passing me off to anybody, he dealt with me directly and we were actually able to make this happen same day, which is almost the first time in the 170 shows I've done. So thank you very much, Micah. That was pretty cool.
Well, it's an honor, man. Yeah, I don't like to operate like that. I'm kind of one of those old school guys that call me up. Let's have a conversation, give my number out and let's have a conversation about stuff. And, I love doing this kind of thing. It's an honor to be on the show.
Thank you very much. You mentioned that when you started talking to Chuck or whatever, he gave you his cell number.
Mm-hmm.
All right, go ahead, give it to us. We'll wait.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's when you give out the rejection hotline number. Is that still a thing that people do that?
Probably. I know that when I was in high school.
Maybe I'm the only one that ever got the rejection hotline.
Well, this might actually be a little bit worse. So I grew up in a small town right outside of San Antonio, and there was this girl in high school, and I was new to the school, and this was the first time I was asking anybody out, and so I, worked up the courage, and I asked this girl for her phone number, and this was before cell phones, so you had to wait till you got home to call her. She gave me her phone number. I was so excited. The rest of the day, I was just so excited. I got home and I called her, and the number she had given me was the non-emergency number to the local police department.
Oh.
So it's funny as shit now. It wasn't all that funny then, but boy, it sure did make a memory. I don't remember her name, but I remember that event. All right, so roughly the running time of Chuck and Tito is more or less 80 minutes. How much more of this film ended up on the editing room floor?
Oh God, I mean, anytime you make a movie, it's crazy amounts of footage that you go through and crazy amounts of things that I always tell people, or there's a movie you write, there's a movie you shoot, and a movie you edit, And I mean, we shot like crazy on this thing. I think we did 45 interviews, and the shortest interview was over an hour and 40 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we were shooting like crazy. I mean, we left no stone unturned, and hundreds of hours. I think we had like 40 terabytes
Holy shit.
of footage.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so we were, it's no small task, man, when you're doing like a feature-length documentary and it's archival. I mean, man, it is a grind, going through the archival stuff and trying to figure all that out on top of going through your transcriptions and everything. So we have a lot of things. It's a lot to cram in 90 minutes too, So I think we did the best job that we possibly could.
Well, hats off. I have not seen it because I haven't. I don't have a good excuse. This happened so fast. I would have watched it before, but I didn't have a chance to. I will watch it. I'm very excited to watch it this week. So I'm looking forward to it. I've heard a lot about it, and all the reports are that you did an amazing job, so I can't wait. And,
Thanks,
and just to hear Chuck and Tito themselves talking about what a great job you did, I mean, that speaks volumes in itself.
Yeah, those guys are class acts. They treated me really well. I have nothing but respect for both of them. They were awesome throughout this process. And, I think that we kind of developed a lifelong friendship throughout it too, which is, also important to me.
That's kick-ass. That's got to be, especially for documentary filmmaking, which does not usually break the bank unless you're Michael Moore.
Right.
But I feel like that's got to be one of the greatest benefits of the business that you're in is the connections and the friendships that you're going to make.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's awesome. I think that if you like to talk to people and you're genuinely curious about people, I think that's works to your favor. I think the hardest part, it's great when it works out. It's hard when somebody's mad at you. I think that then you kind of feel like, did I betray my friend? Did I let down my friend? It's a tricky balance for sure, as a filmmaker, because you want to be honest about the story. And sometimes the honesty is not how the story really went when you talk to other people besides the person that it's about. They kind of view themselves in a certain way, but in this film, that wasn't the case, and we were able to tell their story, and Chuck and Tito both came out very happy with it, and I've been really proud of that.
Very cool. So, hey, let me ask you this. As a documentary filmmaker, what do you think are the necessary ingredients to make a compelling documentary? Oh,
man. Well, I think the biggest thing is you have to have your macro story and your micro story. I think you have to have what I mean by that is you have to have this story that's telling about the conflict with Chuck and Tito, right? And then you got this bigger part of the story that's like the growth of the sport and are these guys getting paid what they deserve and all of this stuff that's generally you want that to be relevant to something that's going on, a conversation that's happening in time right now. So if you watch the Great 30 for 30 on OJ, you had OJ's trial, but then you had all the Rodney King stuff to give context to it. So the big stuff, the big picture stuff should inform, some of that other stuff. And you should be like, wow, I care more because I have context of the outside world. And so I think a lot of times people get caught trying to make a feature-length documentary that really doesn't have that bigger social consciousness to it. It doesn't have anything bigger to say other than this guy likes to fight and this guy doesn't want to fight. And you know what I mean? And so you got to find that bigger storyline that everybody can resonate with and not just the people who are fans with that. And I think that stems across anybody that's trying to make a documentary is that you got to be able to have multiple layers to it to be able to hold your interest, especially if it's over an hour.
I think that's a great answer. Thank you for that. Now, Micah, I know that we got a little bit of a late start, so, again, I apologize. But before I let you go, can you tell everybody where they can find you on the social medias?
Oh, yeah. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Micah Brown Film. It's MICAH Brown and film. Yeah. So it's good.
Nice. Now, before I let you go, I mean, I could talk to you for another 3 hours, but that's just not going to happen. But before I let you go, is there anything that I didn't ask or that you wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about?
No, I mean, I think it's been great. The one thing that I'll say about this film that I think is really important is, that hopefully fighters that watch the film appreciate what these guys have done for the sport. Because without Chuck and Tito, the sport would not be where it is today. And hopefully they can see themselves and learn from these guys, what they did good, what they did wrong, and help pushing the sport forward.
Wonderful. Micah Brown is the director of the most recent 30 for 30 doc, and it is called Chuck and Tito. It's available everywhere, right?
Yes, sir. If you go to ESPN Plus, sign up for a free subscription and either keep it or just sign up and watch it and don't keep it. Whatever you need to do, sign up for ESPN Plus and you can watch Chuck and Tito.
Fantastic. Micah Brown, thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate your time. And again, sorry about all the technical glitches, but thank you for hanging in there and being patient. And we got this done, man. You're awesome.
Yeah, you're awesome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. No worries. Have a great day, man.
All right, buddy. See you.
Bye. This is an iTunes review for Fascination Street Podcast. This one is from JTB Real Property. It says, "Super dope!" ! Every episode is uniquely different and it keeps you coming back to see/listen to who Steve is interviewing. The guest list ranges from top celebrities to everyday folks with a story to tell. This is where Steve's knack for getting the guests to open up about their lives, history, and what inspires them comes out. Every time I listen, I feel as if I am sitting at the table with the guest and Steve and a bottle of something that gets us all to loosen up, relax, and spill our guts. Thanks, JTB Real Property.
That was a 5-star iTunes review for Fascination Street Podcast. Rate and review Fascination Street Podcast on iTunes, and maybe next week I'll read your review.
As always, thanks for listening, Streetwalkers. And don't forget, follow the show on Twitter at FascinationSTPD, on Instagram at Fascination Street Pod. Follow the podcast page on Facebook at Fascination Street Podcast. And of course, you can always email me at fascinationstreetpod@gmail.com. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and rate us on iTunes. For the next 3 months, everybody who rates and reviews the show and sends a screenshot to FascinationStreetPod@gmail.com will get a free surprise gift mailed to them. Every single one of you. So do it. Thanks, Streetwalkers. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence. Used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.